aware of the physical body. Just the material body, the hardness and earthiness, the part that is watery, the warmth of the body. The airy part of the body with the breath flowing and the vibration of energy throughout the body. See this physical body for what it really is. Just the elements. The mind is so relaxed. Nothing to do except be aware. Just look and see what this body is. If the mind wanders a little, notice that. If the mind settles on the rise and fall of the breath, notice that. Inclining towards this body, just to see that and stay just with that. What's it like? Just aware of this body. Just staying with the body like that. Sometimes the sensations are noticeable. Hearing, touching, tasting, seeing, and thinking. Sometimes the Vedana is noticeable. Just what it's like to be so simple. Directing awareness to the body. If the feeling is pleasant or unpleasant, or if it's in between or neither. Just simply being aware of the body. The state of mind is so noticeable. Just simply aware of the body. The impermanence is so noticeable. How the body is breaking up and changing. And gently emerging from this meditation. Dear friends, the assigned subject the subject I assigned myself for tonight was to continue with the reflection about the opening of the Dhamma Eye. And for some reason, those words shifted around in the mind. It became this eye-opening Dhamma. There's two very standard descriptions about stream entry that are given in the suttas. One is where one hears about the Four Noble Truths, are about the arising and cessation of phenomena. And this awesome arising of the insight, the realization that everything, whatever has the nature to arise, has the nature to cease. And then there's a second standard way, a very common way. Again and again, it's described how different individuals came to their stream entry this way. The Buddha encounters someone and is able to recognize that they have this potential for awakening. And he gives them a series of teachings, beginning with a talk on giving, on generosity, ethical conduct, and heaven. Then he explains the drawbacks of sensual pleasures, the very almost disgusting and corrupt aspect of sensual pleasures, and the benefit of renunciation, of letting go. That would be letting go of our commitment to seeking for happiness through a lifestyle of acquiring all different kinds of materialistic supports and pleasures. So having that a comfortable bed with covered with a fine deer skin, with red pillows at the head of the bed and the foot of the bed, having the delicious food which is served in many separate dishes, with the right different kinds of spices and so forth, or having a family, having a happy family, where your a life partner, your spouse, and the children are all still alive, and they're all happy and staying at home. And then you have a lot of employees or servants, and then you have cattle and goats and horses, different kinds of animals, and you have your fields, and the barn is full of rice and are full of grain that you've grown and threshed and harvested, and the house is well built and all repaired. It's in good shape, and the roof has been very well thatched, so that even if it rains, the rain won't come inside the house. So you could be warm and comfortable with all of your relatives and employees, and having these luxuries, these red pillows or pillows embroidered with flowers or animals or something like that. Having fine things, beautiful things all collected, and then having enough time and energy or enough servants to go around and keep on dusting them and keeping them clean. So this is all part of this these sensual pleasures. So it's not just having a wonderful, awesome sensual experience, having a warm bath or taking a swim in the ocean or seeing a beautiful sunset or falling in love or something like that. Those are sensual pleasures, but it also has this other an aspect of accumulation. And then with that accumulation, then the things that were a special treat become sort of like habitual. And then the habits become necessities, and then there comes to be a certain undertone of anxiety associated with all of those pleasures, because it's so difficult to keep them all up to the right level. And in a certain way, if you think about just to spin a story of what it would be like if you have a wealthy family like that, and the children have been spoiled, and how dissatisfied and anxious and unpleasant-minded the children can become by having too much luxury and too much being spoiled, and then how with the that dukkha of dissatisfaction, how then the seeking after addictive kinds of sensual experiences as an escape from that unpleasantness, so that then what you could say is a sort of like a virtuous pleasure in having wealth that has been accumulated in a virtuous way, then is able to tip over and fall down into anxiety, dissatisfaction, and then subsequently being using those same pleasures in a kind of an addictive way, as a kind of an effort to ward off the anxiety, to ward off the dissatisfaction, or to ward off the whatever. That's the corruption. And then so the benefit of renunciation is when you know that if your happiness comes from the pudding that was served at lunch, then tomorrow you just need more pudding. But if you give up pudding, then you're free. You don't need any more. And so with that renunciation, one starts to have the taste of freedom and the taste of having the agency that the mind that can cultivate this patience, calmness, and equanimity that's not depending on anything external or any particular type of experiences. The benefit of that. So that's the second stage of the training. And then when the Buddha recognizes that this student's mind is ready, pliable, rid of hindrances, uplifted and confident. Then he explained the special teaching of the Buddhas, suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path. And so when that Dhamma is based on that foundation, and when the student is ready, then that Dhamma can indeed be the eye-opening Dhamma. Just hearing this Dhamma, it was like, oh, of course, I didn't know this, but now I know. Then the student attains, understands, and fathoms the Dhamma that go beyond doubt, rid of indecision, becomes self-assured and independent of others regarding the teacher's instructions. And so this is another version of how stream entry comes to be. The Four Noble Truths can be it's a particular application of causation, but it's also the one principle or the method of practice which can be the engine that is so onward leading. What I believe for myself, for my own experience, that there are some things that I have clung to in the past. Some aspect of conceit around ideas of that things should be a certain way, and then feeling like angry and disturbed if they're not the way that they should be, or feeling frightened and depressed because of anicca, because of some kind of a delusion that things are supposed to be permanent. Yes, I know that in the past I've suffered in those ways, and I know that I've come a certain distance towards letting go of those ideas, so that if things are not the way they're supposed to be, even if that moment of discontent comes up, it only lasts for less than 5 seconds. And then the knowledge comes right after, oh, well, it is what it is. And the anxiety around impermanence is nowhere like what it was before. So then it's possible to, realize that at whatever level, the release and the freedom by not clinging on to things anymore. But then it can happen as we go along in this path. The Four Noble Truths is a very urgent and demanding teacher. And it throws, the path becomes more and more like a narrow path. So that any kind of holding on to anything, especially holding on to a self-view or a self-conceit, or holding on to opinions, or holding on to the hunger for pleasure, that we only hold on to them because we didn't see the danger. We don't, it's like we're holding on to something and we don't even know that we're holding on to it. This can happen especially with a status. So if you assume that your job is secure, or your marriage is secure, or that your family is all going to stay alive, or that the economy is going to be okay, or um, anything that you have come to be like complacent about, assuming that there was something stable or something that could be relied on with that, you can become like a fish in the water that can't see the water, because you depend on the world being in a certain kind of a way. And then everything that you have a concept about turns out to be otherwise. And the curtain comes open, and the delusion falls away. And you could realize, like retrospectively say, oh, I was clinging to that. And whatever we're clinging to is where the remaining portion of dukkha that we get to experience in this lifetime is arising. So the dukkha is caused by the craving and clinging. When we let go of the craving and clinging, the dukkha disappears. But to whatever extent, if you still have some persistent unhappiness or dukkha in your life, sorry, that dukkha is your teacher, and it's trying to point out what you're still clinging to that you got to let go of. Just because of your persistent delusion, you can't see it. Or even if you think you see it, you don't know how to let go of it. So, like, views. If you have an idea that of that things ought to be a certain way, and if you get your ego wound up in those opinions and are like adopting a position, taking a stance, even an ethical, good stance, if you're taking it and you've allowed your precious ego to get like tied up in it, and then it becomes rigid and like not even able to see how these conflicts about views can come to be reconciled. So in that way, if we understand the rest of the path, the fourth noble truth, the practice which leads us to the end of dukkha, and we have it's just like losing all reservations about not holding on to anything at all. Whatever is an impediment to making progress on the path, if you become completely able, just, that's an impediment, let it go, let it go. Or we could find, that something that that there is something that we're not yet willing to let go of. And if that's true, then that's where the work is. And we're so blessed to have these Four Noble Truths as our teacher. And we can keep the same teacher all the way from kindergarten up to finishing our graduate school and getting our PhD in liberation. That this same teacher will keep on leading us right up to the end. So another part of this renunciation, this letting go, is also becoming disillusioned or with, I could say, well, nibbida, disenchanted with this life here on the kama loka, the world of desire, which is the world that we live in, having a material body, kind of a mentality, and all the drives and tendencies that we have as human beings in this kama loka, then all of it is like disappointing, and this is why like it said in the sutras that all three of the Vedanas are dukkha. So a pleasant feeling is dukkha, an unpleasant feeling is dukkha, and a neutral feeling is dukkha. That these sense faculties that we have, the capacity of seeing, is impermanent, unstable, unreliable, has the nature of passing away and disappearing. So why cling to the eye? Don't even bother. And the same thing with any visible object or any of the senses, so the senses are, it's how we come into our connection with the external objects in the world. And so we are deeply, deeply attached to them. But to become completely willing to let them go. And then even the aspects of mentality, the contact and the vitaka vichara, the applied thought and sustained thought, creating volitions, even consciousness itself, all of the aspects of mentality. Those things they're all dear and delightful, but they're all horrible. And so this mind, which is fully awake, like the blinders have fallen away, and you can see both sides. You can see, okay, it's beautiful and it's horrible, and there's nothing to struggle about. This coming week, we're coming up to discussing about the first three fetters of sensual desire, skeptical doubt, clinging to rites and rituals, and the Sakkaya Ditthi, the view that is looking for a self in the body or in any of the five aggregates. I also would like to mention that my time of seclusion, they're giving me 3 weeks of a full seclusion time, and that will be starting next Tuesday morning. So Ayya Sobhana is going to be taking over the leading of the program during the next 3 weeks. I don't know if it's ironic that the part about what it's like after we get the stream entry, what our life is like, that's the one that I'm going to skip away and be in my own kuti and possibly not participating in these conversations. But I hope that all of you will give your appreciative attention to Ayya Sobhana, who I know has been preparing for this part of the course. So she's been staying out in the forest for the past 7 or 8 weeks and practicing meditation and doing her own program. So she's going to be coming here and joining you. This weekend on the Sunday, because that's the half moon, it's the half moon Uposatha, where we will remember the parinibbana of Mahapajapati Gautami, who is the founder of the Bhikkhuni Sangha, who was the Buddha's stepmother, who cared for him after his birth mother passed away. There was we had so many wonderful moments this past weekend, and one of the things that I felt was a particularly good moment was realizing how there's a kind of a confluence of the incidents of a person's life and then the timeless and universal Dhamma. And when those two things come together, it's kind of, there's a spark there, and it's so powerful when the actual lived experience of a human being, of a flesh and blood human being, with their own biography and their own experience and their own everything that they've built up over all the countless aeons of their karmic existence coming up to that moment, and then that particular person at that particular moment of life has some kind of encounter with the timeless Dhamma, which brings up that awakening moment. And as we look at the Therigatha verses, it will be a chance to appreciate those. Will be the exclamations or the joyful poems that were written by the bhikkhunis in particular at their recalling the time of their enlightenment, their full enlightenment. So if you want to come to the program next Sunday, and if you want to prepare ahead of time, you could open up a copy of the Therigatha and read those poems. And you don't even have to really analyze them, just allow those thoughts to absorb into the heart and reflect about them. it's the same way, we do, because we're human, we do a lot of analytical thinking as a way of helping us to break down our ignorant delusions and preconceptions by thinking and approaching things very carefully. And also, in order to understand what the Buddha really meant or what he was really saying, then we do a lot of careful thinking to recollect, to recall the teachings that the Buddha has given us that have been carried down by the tradition, and how these teachings fit together. So that contemplation and reflecting and careful thinking and is definitely useful. In this way, our path is a journey of investigation and discovery. Just as I was speaking just before this about, what I kind of discovered about taking the Four Noble Truths as a method. It's a method of practice, as much as it's an observation about the nature of reality. And so in that way, to understand something, for something to become meaningful, it means that, like, we know what to do. We know what to do about it. Is when we know what to do about it, then we know what the meaning is. So when we know that dukkha should be fully understood, and the cause of dukkha should be abandoned, and the freedom, the release of the mind that comes with the cessation of that clinging should be experienced, and that path should be cultivated. If we just integrate that, so that any teaching of the Buddha, that's even the teaching of anicca. Okay, so you thought about anicca, you talked about anicca, you've listened about anicca for a long time. So what's the significance? What's the atta? What's the worth of this anicca? Understanding anicca, how does that get us to the goal? And so these teachings are not simply like a beautiful gem to be admired, but it's to be used by us for our own realization. I know that my colleague Ayya Brahmavara is so good and putting out a few ideas and then pausing for conversations. And I have the tendency of talking until I'm done, and then inviting the conversation after I've already made you forget the first thing that I said, because I said too many things afterwards. But I'd like to ask if any of you have a question or about what I have tried to explain, or if you have, excuse me, if you have from your own experience, how these teachings will lead us on. I see Chris. Welcome to unmute.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So you were talking about impermanence and how clinging to things can cause suffering. But I feel like it gets kind of complicated when it comes to something like a romantic relationship, because, well, there's a difference between having love and compassion um, versus attachment and clinging and not being willing to let go. Especially if it's a somewhat chaotic person. Um, so I was wondering if you had any advice on that, I guess, on how you can still be loving and compassionate in a romantic relationship, but at the same time not cling, I guess, and be so scared to lose that person.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. My teacher, Bhante Gunaratana, sometimes used to say when he was asked these questions, he said, well, I became a monk when I was 12 years old. And I really don't have the knowledge to give people advice about their love life. On the other hand, I took up Buddhism when I was already 40 years old. And I have actually, I've been there, done that. I've spent, decades of my life by being driven by a fear of losing the object of my love, and a lot of anxiety about where the keeping a certain kind of like excitement and vitality and in relationships was like the whole endeavor of life at that time. And it's not, the Buddha does not condemn people to be householders and to form those family relationships and to make the bond of connection with the people that they care about in that particular way. It's also true that when you come to be a fully enlightened arhat, you will have to, you won't be able to be engaged in the same kind of way with your romantic partners. It just won't be the same anymore. In the meantime, I would suggest really being aware that there's a lot of dukkha involved in that in family life. There's a lot of dukkha in family life, whether it's between parents and children, between partners, or with young people who are trying to establish themselves. So then, if you just remember that we're, as a human being, we got to have a mixture of pleasure and pain. There's no attachment without dukkha. The Buddha taught you that dukkha is a part of life. So when dukkha comes to you, don't be all in a shock about it and say, oh no, don't let me have any dukkha. Why am I getting this dukkha? It's not fair. Why should I have dukkha? You should just say, well, okay, it's dukkha. I'm a human being. This is part of the package of my humanity right now. So that's one thing. And the second thing is like attachment in relationships, with couples or with parents and children. Attachment is really so normal and natural, but you have to kind of talk to yourself and understand that everything that's dear and delightful to me will change and vanish, and prepare yourself to lose whatever you love the most. Prepare yourself for that loss. It will happen. You know, even if you stay together until you're 99 years old, one of you will die first, and then the other one will be separated. So prepare yourself for that and just try to develop that flexibility and that as much as possible, even though attachment is kind of inevitable, I'm keeping with this open hand. So your child or your partner, they're their own person. They're free to go. And that open-handed love is much more conducive to growth. Those are just a few ideas. One of my first experiences in the Dhamma was something in that nature. At the time, I had a crush on somebody, and the result of 1 week meditation retreat was I was able to admit that they were not reciprocating my wishes, and getting a freedom from that. So it's like there's a description of dukkha. It's like in the Satya-Vibhanga Sutta, the analysis of the truth, or in the sutta on turning the wheel of Dhamma, or it's in several different places. It's like, what is dukkha? It's birth, old age, and death is dukkha. It's not getting what you want, or getting what you don't want. Or being forced to be together with persons or with something that's hateful to you, or forced to be separated from something that's lovable to you. And I sometimes find it useful especially to keep those 4 aspects of dukkha in mind, so that then when I am in a state of agony, I'm saying, well, which one of the 4 is it right now? Is it because I got something I didn't want? Is it because I didn't get something I wanted? Is it because of loss and separation? Or is it because of, the agony of being forced to be in a situation which is hateful or aversive? So I hope that helps.
Your words are very poignant. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Richard.
Thank you, Ayya. To add to what you were saying to Chris, when I was 26, I was living with my girlfriend, and my best friend came to stay with us. I won't go into all the details, but after some period of time, I found out that they were having an affair. And it so crushed me that my best friend and she was kind of like my wife. We had lived together for 2 years, and we're actually planning on getting married. it caused such an emotional disturbance that I couldn't eat food and I could barely sleep or anything for about 2 weeks. I lost 20 pounds. And I went to visit my Buddhist mentor, and he lived in a truck and camper on the road, you know. He's a very simple person. And so we were sitting in the front of his cab, and I was all emotionally distraught and everything. And I guess I went to see him to, you know, for comfort or something. And I was crying, and he was trying to comfort me. And all of a sudden, this thought just, it was like a bubble, just came up in my mind. And that thought was, if you really love somebody, you would be happy if they were happy, even if it was without you. And it just completely transformed my way of looking at the world. And this may sound strange, but the whole world turned to like a liquid gold, everything that I looked at that moment. And I became completely peaceful and calm. And so I thanked my mentor and said, well, I guess it's time to go now. And I went home, and on the way home, I stopped and had a nice meal, the first meal I'd had in 2 weeks. And I went home and I fell asleep and slept very well through the night. And I woke up early in the morning, and I remembered that the Roshi, that was my mentor's teacher, was giving a class that day at the Zen Center. So up to that point, even though I was studying Zen intellectually for a long time, I had a very hard time meditating. And even 5 minutes seemed like hours to me. But when I went to the Zendo that day, they always meditate for 2 hours before the class. I was able to sit very peacefully and calmly for the class the whole time. And so you could see that there was something really changed in my mind just by developing that thought. And I think that thought is kind of like metta. You know, I think that's really like a pure type of metta, you know, that you're not thinking of yourself. You know what I mean? You're thinking of the happiness and welfare and everything of others. And so that's helped me a lot throughout the later part of my life in relationships and other things, you know. Anyways, I just thought that story might be kind of interesting and might give some inspiration, you know, if someone was struggling with something like that. Anyways, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Well, we are still sort of like in the thick of it with our human life and everything that it is to be human. We got the instruction earlier on in this retreat to develop this what's called Yoniso Manasi Karota. That means making awareness, which is deep, going below the surface, which is appropriate, and which is complete. So in a certain kind of way, like what Richard was describing, was instead of just looking at the situation from like the self-centered point of view, just open the frame up a bit and say, well, you know, my girlfriend and my best friend are really happy. So, and just being able to see um, from from that wider perspective. Even there's a kind of like a sort of like a big sky meditation, which is to try to see that whatever, like the particular kind of ways that we experience these difficulties and all the challenges of human life and family life and relationships. Now, how many people have been through this? It's not really just my personal thing that's owned by me, but I'm rather like touching into an aspect of something which is like a pattern of humanity that involves desire, attachment, the fear of loss, and the way that our own sense of our own safety and welfare is, it gets to be tied up in whatever external things, whether it's our relationships or whatever. And so we could say, oh, well, don't give your power away to the other person like that. But at the same time, everybody's doing it all. Everybody is doing this all the time. And so it's because of, the Buddha was concerned about suffering. Why are people built to suffer? Why? And it was because of his integrity and his compassion that he just didn't say, well, to every sunny day there must come a little cloud or something like that, or some kind of shallow way of looking at it. But instead he said, well, is there a way out of this fix? And then he really investigated. And so to whatever extent, like all of the dramas of life are opportunities, there can be this, like this is what I'm talking about, for this encounter between the particulars of our human existence and some universal Dhamma, some universal truth, a universal way of understanding it, that then unlocks the whole thing and turns the wheel of or the torture wheel into a field of brilliant light. Richard.
Thank you. Um, since this is a monastery of bhikkhunis, and right now you probably do it a lot, but let's just say right now you seem to be emphasizing a lot about the bhikkhunis at the Buddha's time and their influence, right, on the development of the Dharma. I have developed a theory, and nobody needs to accept it or anything. If you don't like it, just forget about it. But there's the traditional kind of well-known story about the Buddha, and that he sees the four different things, old age, disease, death, and the monk, and and then he sneaks out of the palace, with the aid of the gods and all that. But actually, the Buddha never tells that story about himself. There's actually a previous Buddha that he tells that story about. So when I found that out, it got me wondering, well, what was the Buddha's motivation? How did he come to the point of wanting to go seeking to find Nibbana? And so I was thinking about, okay, so right around the time he left, he had his first child. Now, before that, his mother had died in childbirth. And at some point during his life, that must have come to his understanding. Somehow somebody must have revealed it at some point. And so here he is now, his wife and him, they're having their first child. So he must have been very worried about his wife because of the fact that his own mother died giving birth to him. And so this must have weighed tremendously on his conscience. And then finally, okay, she gets through it. She survives, she lives. He has the first child. But I think it was this. So I give women tremendous credit in this way. I think it was this, so much worry about causing suffering and misery, right, to women, because women bear the brunt of the birth process, right? And in the ancient times, before modern medicine, I've heard numbers as high as 50% of all women died either in childbirth or because of childbirth. So this must have made him so aware of the suffering of existence, right? And that's why he says, before he left, he says, why should I, who are subject to old age, disease, and death, right, also seek after that, right, which is subject to old age, disease, and death. And then he says, so eventually he shaved off his hair and beard, put on the ochre robe, and while his parents were crying, tearfully, that he was leaving, he left, right? That's the story he tells about his leaving home. But anyway, so, in that sense, I kind of feel that the difficulties that his mother and his wife and everything underwent because of him, in a sense, you kind of blame yourself in a sense, to a certain extent in those situations. That was kind of like the spark, the catalyst that really made him start thinking about old age, disease, and death, and these things, strongly. Anyways, it's just a theory I have, but if you like it, fine. If you don't, that's what they do. Anyway, thank you very much.
Indeed, birth is very dangerous. I'm going to tell you a story that I heard from Bhante Gunaratana, which I think is sort of his imagination. He emphasizes that you shouldn't just think that the Buddha was like a bad husband who left his wife and child without any resources, but one should realize that they were surrounded by the extended family with many, many different kinds of support. And as Bhanteji imagined it, his wife, Ayya Sobhana, said to him, "Darling, everybody knows that your main interest is meditation. You've been into meditation ever since you were a little boy, and you have this important work to do, this important quest. Please, I ask you, just before you go, give me a child." And so then the Buddha complied with that. But Yasodhara, while she was at home, she practiced meditation and was sort of like in parallel through a kind of an intuitive connection or a heart connection with the Buddha. that she experienced many of the arduous practices and things that he was going through, then she was experiencing some of the same things. She did become a fully ordained bhikkhuni and become an arahant, and she's one of the women whose poetry we may look at next week. But the main drift, what I want you to take from today is seeing how the whole drift of the path of the teaching is leaning and sloping and slanting towards liberation, and that there is a key moment when you will be able to see the Four Noble Truths in a completely different way than how you saw them before, and when you're a big percentage of this clinging to identity just drops off, and it's possible to have stream entry even as a householder. Even we know of in the old times married couples who were still having sexual relations with each other who still obtained stream entry. So you can do it together with your partner. But these practices or these ideas, these teachings have to be integrated, and you have to find a way to use them to let go of grasping and clinging in whatever way you can. If you still have a family, you're still a parent, you still have commitments to family life, or you still have commitments to your job, you still have commitments to your anything at all, you can do those things, but do it with an open hand, without the clinging. So this may be enough for now. I thank everybody for your patient listening and for your good practice and your good efforts. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Subhatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namam.
Thank you, Ayya, for the lesson. 3 bow to our teacher.
Thank you.